say, dirtbag. This is Kid Shriner, the voice of the Green Arrow, and you are listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast.
The original Justice League has become a memory.
I am resigning from the Justice League.
What's going to happen to the League now?
We rebuild. From the ashes of that great conflict, a new team has arisen. A much, much bigger team.
Each of you brings something different to the table.
Old friends, new heroes. And as usual, plenty of bad guys jumping up to get beat down.
Calm down, and I'll let you go. How about you kiss my ass?
Watch out, evildoers. There's nowhere to run. Because this year, they're all around you. The League is unlimited. An all-new original series starring every superhero worth cheering for. And then some. Justice League Unlimited.
Where am I exactly?
Among friends.
There's strength in numbers.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 205 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. That's right, it is Liam. Liam, we are smack dab in the middle of a month of Justice League Unlimited episodes, and boy, this week we are in for a treat with another one of, it's definitely my favorite Justice League Unlimited episode of all time, I think, and it's definitely a fan favorite. Welcome to episode 205 of the DCAU Review.
That's right, that's beloved by you and myself as well, of course, as well as you said, the fans, and even one of the show's, one of the founding fathers of the whole DCAU, Bruce Timm, counts this as one of his favorite JLU episodes. So we are in rarefied air here as we review the episode Double Date.
That is correct. A fun one that we're about to get into here that actually, for what it's worth, there is not a ton of connection to the overall Cadmus story arc here. There's some they allude to it at times, but there's not really much moved forward in the case of the Cadmus story arc that we've been covering here. But that doesn't mean that the detour is not one that we are welcome to have here. So, but before we get into discussing one of my favorite episodes and Bruce Timm's and your favorites of the Justice League Unlimited run here, let's get our official Imdb synopsis brought to you by The Pod Tower. That's right. Check out youtube.com/The Pod Tower. Get our entire back catalog, every Justice League Unlimited episode that we've ever reviewed, plus much, much more. And in addition to that, you get great content from our friends at Tim Talk and the Watchtower database as well. Liam, this episode originally debuted here in the States on the Cartoon Network back on June the 4th, 2005. That's right. Means we're coming up here in just a little bit, a little over a month or so here. We'll be celebrating the 17-year anniversary of this episode.
That's right. So this synopsis is for the episode A Double Date, which is written by Gail Simone, with direction by Joaquim dos Santos, with music by 2/3 of the dynamic music partners for Carter and Michael Question, and animation by DR Movie Co. And that synopsis reads as such. Seeking to avenge the death of her parents, the Huntress enlists the help of the Question in tracking down Stephen Mandragora, a mobster in a protective custody, and who is being guarded by the Green Arrow and Black Canary.
Oh no, poor sentence structure, very wordy, missing some of the content there, the plot. I do not like that description at all.
Yeah, you know what? It just limped across the finish line for me. It's a passing grade, but it's not being it's not going to get you valedictorian. So
right. It might get you a degree because C's get you degrees, but we will.
That's right.
We will not labor with that crowdsourced description of this episode. Instead, Liam, we will begin talking about our own description of the plot here. We, of course, have the cold open that we get here taking place what appears to be someone's mansion, and there are these two extremely stereotypical Italian gangsters standing outside. We'll talk a little bit just how stereotypical they are and based on their character designs in just a little bit, but they are discussing how to make scones, and they happen to hear some noise a little bit away from them, and they are quite frightened. And wouldn't you know it, descending from the skies is none other than the Huntress, who previously made some appearances in the background, but this is making her official speaking debut here for the series. And she quickly does away with these lackeys and heads inside, quite apparent to be on a mission. She walks in and begins sort of calling out for this Stephen Mandragora. She begins telling him, essentially, she does what you might expect the Phantasm to do. She's there to deliver the end of Stephen Mandragora, and even fires several arrows from her newly obtained crossbow into what appears to be a sleeping Stephen Mandragora's body. At what point she goes over to check on the body, and of course it is not him. She realizes that she's been hoodwinked. There's a stack of pillows, and it's at this point she realizes she's in a little bit of trouble.
Stephen Mandragora. Been a while. I've changed some since we met last, but you haven't changed. All these years you've been building your empire with thievery and murder. But it ends tonight. No.
Huntress.
John,
You were warned. You were told to stay away from Mandragora. You have violated my direct orders. You've crossed the line.
That's right. So we have her immediately teleported to the watchtower by as we've come to find out, this was something of a setup by the Martian Manhunter, John Jones himself, the only original leaguer in this episode, and he's really only in it for a couple of minutes here. But we find out that Huntress had in fact been warned to stay away from Mandragora, and obviously throughout the episode we'll come to find exactly her reasons for wanting to get after him and in fact kill him. And Huntress is sort of blowing Jean off and doesn't want to hear his lecture. And
can I just say something real quick? It's funny, the irony that Huntress is taken aback that she is being watched from the watchtower. She cannot believe that Jean would have the audacity to watch her from the watchtower. But continue.
Very good. Yes, it's a good bit of sweet irony there. But yes, Huntress is a bit defensive and angry at first, but then sort of seems resigned to her fate as she's willing to sort of take the slap on the wrist. But Jean informs her that this won't be any sort of mere disciplinary action. In fact, she is being fired from the Justice League and is told to I guess, get her things and get out. So as she is sort of fuming and trying to figure out her next move, she happens upon the questions room where he is, as you mentioned, we do get mentioned, as was discussed in the Doomsday Sanction, Batman has sort of tasked the question with tracking down leads on Cadmus, and Hunter promises him that if he helps her track down this Mandragora character without the League knowing, and then it's sort of getting around the League's explicit instructions to leave him alone, that she will give him some secret info that she's learned about Cadmus that will help in his investigation.
Maybe you're not looking in the right direction. You're the League's data guy, the conspiracy buff, right? Wildcat says you're a nut job.
Funny, he says the same thing about you.
He's right.
Okay, bored now. Goodbye.
You must be the ugliest guy of all time, Question. Hiding your face like that.
Go away. Don't touch that.
Wow. I had no idea that the Girl Scouts were responsible for the crop circle phenomenon.
Few people do. Few even think to ask the question.
Well, I have a question for you then. Do you know what apophenia is?
Apophenia, noun. The tendency to see connections where none exist. Did you come here just to make fun of my work?
No, Q. I came to help you. And let's just keep the rest of the League out of it, shall we? Here's the deal. I tell you what I know about Cadmus immediately after you help me find out what rock Stephen Mandragora is hiding under.
Interesting.
The Question is just intrigued enough to take her up on that offer, and from there we actually cut to the aforementioned Mandragora, and we see him, and just immediately, just what a great bad guy for this piece. Just this huge, anger, sort of, slovenly, rude guy who's making cracks about the agents. He's making cracks at he makes some very charged remarks, would we say, to Black Canary and Green Arrow, and just trying to wind them all up, all while sort of enjoying being in this lap of luxury, as sort of is supposed to be sort of turning state's evidence against his fellow mobsters, but doesn't really seem to be giving the feds anything to really go on just yet, as it seems like he's mostly just content to wind up not only the agents, but Green Arrow and Black Canary themselves.
Yeah, that's a very entertaining and funny, and again, one of those things that I have no idea how they got this scene past some of the censors, because there's quite a few euphemisms that Mr. Mandragora uses in Black Canary's direction, and there is some interesting cutting that we don't quite get to hear. He's winding them both up, and Green Arrow is the first to sort of clench his fist and want to go attack him, and has to be held back by this Agent Faraday that we're introduced to, that is sort of trying to get as much information as he can out of Mandragora in this safe house. And we then cut to Black Canary, who's being calm, cool, and collected, and not allowing him to get her wound up. And then he makes a comment towards her about her being with the Green Arrow because all of the other real men in the Justice League were already taken.
Nothing this guy can say is going to affect me one way or the other.
Is that right? Well, then perhaps you won't mind explaining how a lovely young lady like you ends up with a nobody like him. Were all the real men in the Justice League already taken?
I hope you're proud of yourself. Now we have to do guard duty from outside.
Hope I'm proud of myself. You're the one that punched him.
Yeah, but ow! It was like punching a brick wall. There's no fat on that man.
Will you let me look? I think you'll live to punch suspects another day, pretty bird. Let's find some higher ground.
And that seems to push her a little bit over the edge, as we see that they've actually been relegated to watch from the outside. They actually head up to a tree house that is sitting in one of the trees outside, which I thought was a great set piece for this scene. They're sitting in a tree house observing the safe house, and as they are sitting there discussing just, I guess, the fine points of, I guess, the morality of having a state's witness and granting somebody immunity in exchange for information, someone that they know has killed people and done terrible things. And Black Canary is sort of discussing this with Green Arrow, and he fully admitting that it's not a perfect system, but it's to get other bad guys and to get more bad guys in exchange for this one. So there was some interesting commentary there. I did enjoy that. But as they're having this deep theological discussion on this sort of way of doing things, wouldn't you know it, a police car pulls up, and they're immediately intrigued. Mandragora appears to be quite upset and potentially afraid that these two cops that he didn't recognize could be after him. And not only do the cops arrive, but Black Canary and Green Arrow also observe what appears to be a Pontiac, a bluish Pontiac, also pull up behind them. And they observe from there, they also observe the Huntress and the Question as well. And wouldn't you know it, that we cut back to the house, and it turns out that these two cops are not, in fact, cops, but they're not here to kill Mandragora. No, they are actually Mandragora's lackeys that we were introduced to in the first scene. And they're there to provide a distraction, which allows Mandragora, who Black Canary mentioned previously, it seems he's based a little bit off of perhaps the Spider-Man villain, the Kingpin. She mentions that while he's a hulking mass of a man, he's completely made of muscle. And after she laid a punch on him, her hand hurts quite a lot. So Mandragora, quite a formidable foe, at least a physical presence, as he begins taking out these special agents, and as his lackeys have provided this distraction, and just enough of a distraction here as we see that he's actually able to escape. Not only that, but we get our first sort of interaction between the Huntress and the Question, because as they walk up to the safe house, and Green Arrow and the Black Canary sort of question them. No, yes, very pun, very much intended. I think the word question is uttered about 15 times in this episode. I appreciated it, but they begin to question what's going on. Huntress tries to say that she's been sent there by Jean, but Jean has actually given them the heads up ahead of time that she was removed from the Justice League. So that causes the Question to throw the first punch. And we get our first hero versus hero battle that we've seen here in a while, as we get the Question and the Huntress teaming up to face Black Canary and the Green Arrow. And it's at this time that we realize that Mandragora has escaped. And as they're doing their sort of reconnaissance and checking in the house in the aftermath, Green Arrow notices that the Question is picking something up off the ground and demands that he show him what it is. The Question flashes and tells him that it's this key that he picked up off the ground. And this has made Huntress very upset as they go their separate ways, saying that he wasn't very smooth. But in fact, it looks like that the Question has duped them into thinking that it was the key, when in fact it was his key to a storage facility down by the train station. And this in fact was a ship schedule that he picked up off the ground, and that they're going to head to the docks. But just when they thought that they had one-upped over Green Arrow and Black Canary, Green Arrow suspected from the start that he in fact was being duped. So they return to the treehouse to observe the Question and Huntress leaving, and decide that they're going to do some reconnaissance of their own and try and follow, just to figure out where the Question and the Huntress indeed are actually going.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this whole bit here. One, because you begin to establish the differences in the two pairings that we see in this episode, and the sort of the interaction that Black Canary and Green Arrow have before the Question and Huntress get there is very sort of sweet and loving, and you establish that their relationship has sort of progressed since we saw them in the Cat and Canary episode. And then you also have this contrasted by these just out of control, out of their mind Huntress and Question, who immediately goes 0 to 100, immediately start throwing punches to try to solve their issues. And then again you have Huntress and Question thinking they're being so slick and that they've tricked Canary and Arrow, but of course Green Arrow has been around the block times, is sort of outwitting them. So the sort of the chess game that continues there as Question and Huntress take off towards this shipping container, and at this point we kind of get the full explanation of what exactly Huntress's motivations are, as the Question quickly deduces, as he would as a good detective, that Huntress doesn't know anything about Cadmus, but that in the meantime he's put some pieces together, including the fact that Mandragora worked for Helena's father, and that he eventually decided to seize power by killing the Huntress's parents, and that the Huntress, of course, wants revenge. And it's a very dramatic sequence. We'll certainly talk more about it in visuals, but it really does set up this, it really gives you a lot of weight to it. Again, this is an example of obviously it's a TV Y7 show. You can't show like a guy murder two people with his bare hands, but just the sort of the implications of it are very growing. And Huntress sort of tells the question, well, then you know what I'm going to do when we find him, and the question is sort of still willing to go along with it and to help her out, although he sort of continues to play as to exactly why it is that he's willing to go along with this. And just as they continue to have this conversation, they notice that they are in fact being followed by Green Arrow and Black Canary, and we get another kind of fun. We get a fun like car chase action beat again, as they're driving up ramps and going onto train tracks, and Question and Huntress are able to get away, and Green Arrow and Black Canary are just able to avoid getting smashed into the front of a train as they call on Jean to use the teleporter to get him out of danger. But that sort of sets up that everybody is sort of converging at this shipping yard, as Mandragora and his henchmen have made it, as well as Huntress and Question, and then of course Green Arrow and Black Canary won't be far behind. And it's time for kind of the big main event here.
That is right. Yeah, it's where we get the big reveal. And Huntress is speculating. She feels like they're searching for a needle in a haystack at this point. She's talking to the Question, and how in the world are they going to be able to find Mandragora? And he reveals that in actuality, he believes not that Mandragora is leaving on one of these ships, but that he's actually waiting for one of the ships to come in. And we get the reveal that he's actually there. The Question is correct in this assumption, and that he's actually there. Mandragora is actually there, not to leave, but to meet one of the ships. And that's because there's very important cargo on that ship. That's right. His son, Edgar, who we learn had been kidnapped by a rival gang and been held for ransom, and who since then Stephen had dealt handedly with them and made them pay, further cementing his role as this evil gangster. And but his son Edgar was indeed rescued, and he was there biding his time with never really having any intention to spill any of the beans or to share any information with the government, but he was just there to bide time in an attempt to stall and then get away so that he could create new identities for himself and his son Edgar. But before we get to that plot point reveal, of course, we have our final sort of battle here, is jump right before the Huntress and the Question can jump in to deal with Mandragora. Black Canary and Green Arrow show up, and they begin sort of a fisticuffs battle with Mandragora, something, again, that we can talk about in visuals in just a second. But Black Canary is seemed to be bested despite using her canary cry. She pushes herself to the limit and nearly passes out. And just as Mandragora is about to seemingly kill her, Huntress steps in and mentions that she has arrows that will actually do some real damage, like piercing skin, as opposed to the Green Arrow's arrows that simply bounced off of Mandragora. So it's at this point that Mandragora says, well, I guess it's surrender time, back to the state penitentiary. And Huntress reveals that nope, she's there to actually kill him. And then she aims her crossbow at him in a very dramatic moment, while Mandragora is holding his son Edgar, and he begins to shield him, warns him to get behind him and that everything will be okay. Of course, this mirror is a mirror image of exactly what happened to a young Helena Bertinelli as she watched her own parents die. And there's beautiful storytelling here that she has this flashback to exactly what she saw as a child, sort of peeking a look through a closet, watching her parents be killed at the hands of Mandragora. And Question at this point jumps in and asks her to stop, and asks her if this is what she really wants. And she hesitates for a second. Her finger goes to the trigger as if she's going to pull it. And she says, no, it's not what she wants. She still pulls the trigger, but she's since lifted her arm and shoots a pallet full of metal beams that drop down onto Mandragora. Black Canary swoops in to protect Edgar. and Green Arrow jumps on top of the both of them in an effort to protect them from the steel beams. And the beams crush Mandragora, but as we mentioned, the established sort of Kingpin-esque motif and his physique has protected him, because we get a stay alive groan, and we learn that that's where we learn that he was truly just trying to stall for time and had no interest in helping the state to that point. And we kind of get our last little bit there, as we get the four heroes standing together, and Huntress finally gets to ask the question, just why he went out of his way, knowing that she didn't know anything about Cadmus, why he went out of the way to help her. And we kind of get the reveal, and it's pretty sweet.
Mandragora never had any intention of cooperating with the prosecutors. He was just stalling until his son arrived. Their new identities were already in place, not to mention a Cayman Island account full of ill-gotten gains to finance their new lives.
You knew all along that kid was going to be on that freighter.
I do my homework.
Then why go to all the trouble to help? Why risk your life for me?
Because I like you. Where are we going?
Don't ask so many questions.
I'm sorry, but ew.
Yes, it's incredible. We'll certainly talk a lot about this, I think, voice acting as well. But again, just showing the sort of the juxtaposition between the two couples here at the end, as you have, Canary and Green Arrow sort of sitting lovingly together, and then Huntress is again kind of reading the question, giving the question the third degree, trying to figure out what exactly his angle is, and he admits finally a bit sheepishly that it's just because he likes her and that he wanted to spend some time with her. And so she gives him a nice kiss, and they again, you talk about innuendos they got away with. She pulls him by the tie off screen and tells him not to ask so many questions, and when he asks where they're going. And our ending is just we cut back to Green Arrow and Black Canary, who are quite disgusted by the idea of it. So we get sort of again the juxtaposition of the sort of the more traditional and this just insane hot mess that is Huntress in Question sort of kicking off here. So really fun. It's not you don't get the big grand dramatic ending, but you get this kind of fun little quirky comedy beat to go out on, and fun too.
Yeah, it's a nice little ending to it. I love Black Canary's reaction of being just pure disgust at the fact that these two characters happen to like each other and have shown their affection in front of her. So it's a fun way to end it, I guess. Liam, that puts a bow on our rundown of the actual plot. This is, as I've already mentioned, one of my favorite stories. The great Gail Simone, as you mentioned, penned this entire story, and there's some great fun information that she shared a little bit that you sent over today as we're preparing for the episode, that she actually recapped on her Twitter, that I thought was just so awesome to see, because this story had a completely different look to it originally. It was supposed to be a Batgirl themed episode, a sort of a Birds of Prey vehicle that would have involved Batgirl being too injured to be, or Barbara being too injured to be Batgirl and thus becoming Oracle. So we get the DCAU Birds of Prey. But that didn't work out because of the bat embargo, the famous bat embargo that didn't allow Justice League to use the Batman characters. So instead, they swapped out the Huntress and the Question instead, and gave this to Gail Simone. And boy, she had some funny memories about this one, and just some really endearing things where they let a great writer just write a great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the years on her Twitter, she's a great storyteller, not just in comics but on Twitter. A great follow if you haven't. We often will do these sort of longer, sort of in-depth threads exploring a topic, and she was very good friends and sort of very much looked up to Dwayne McDuffie, of course, who's one of the head writers and producers on the series, and of course, was a big fan of Bruce Timm's work as well. So she was talked about how thrilled she was when they asked her to write an episode, and she said she sort of really tried to carefully write it in the, as she described it, the sort of the house style of a Justice League Unlimited episode. And they got the script and they sort of sent it back with some notes that no, we want a Gail Simone story, not a Gail Simone trying to write a Unlimited. So she sort of took that to heart and rewrote it, and sort of took that compliment. And as we've sort of alluded to, she also shared a story of being in sort of the back room of a big San Diego Comic-Con panel with that Bruce Timm happened to be on, and when someone asked him what his favorite Justice League Unlimited episodes were, he did in fact mention Double Date as one of them. He didn't realize that Simone was in the room at the time, but he mentioned this as episodes as well. And as you mentioned, it's one of our favorites, and certainly I think a fan favorite among most Justice League Unlimited and DCAU fans. So it was just great. And yes, if you've ever read a comic by Gail Simone, this is very much in her voice. She very much has a propensity for that sort of interspersing the epic superhero action with just these really quirky, really funny dialogue bits, like you talked about the scone, the mobsters arguing about scone recipes at the beginning, or even just some of the kind of the sweeter moments, like I said, between Black Canary and Green Arrow, where she's complaining that her hand hurts after she punches Mandragora, and he's sort of arguing with her and about that and all that stuff. So there's some really fun stuff. And I think in the chase sequence, you have sort of Huntress being sort of scared and weirded out by the Question's erratic behavior, and on the other side you have Green Arrow being really hesitant and scared of how determined Black Canary is that she's going to catch them. So you have that sort of juxtaposition as well. So this is 100% a Gail Simone script, as was requested by the producers of this show, and boy, she just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, it's great. I think there's a reason why this is one of the most fun episodes. I feel like it does do a great job of balancing the action with the comedy. If you had told me that Paul Dini had wrote this episode, I would have been like, oh yeah, definitely. I say that as a compliment, because I think it fits right into those great stories that Paul Dini has written, where there's comedy in it, and there's certainly some humor, but there's also action and great storytelling and layering and character building. And when you think about it, Black Canary and Green Arrow, they've been established somewhat in the series, and we did have a little bit of the Question in the Doomsday Sanction, but this is really the first opportunity that you have to have the Huntress, who plays a huge role in this. You're establishing her, this character that was pretty popular in the 90s. You're establishing her story in the DCAU, and then you're taking this off the wall, offbeat character that nobody really knew for the most part, unless you were a diehard DC fan, or this Question character, and you're mashing these two characters together and making this weird story out of it. And the character of the Question, who's this wouldn't be alien to a QAnon chat board, or chat room, and just off the wall zaniness. And we talk about the voice direction just a little bit too. There's all of that works together with this, and some great action sequences, and just a story that is fun from start to finish, and a character, a brand new character in Stephen Mandragora that was created for this series, created for this episode, but does not feel like it didn't feel like a direct ripoff of the Kingpin. Like, I know I mentioned that there are some aspects that were clearly inspired by him, but I don't think it doesn't feel like it's a direct rip. And we didn't even mention it, but we actually mentioned it on the episode when we covered it. But there's retroactive Easter eggs that this Mandragora character, his son Edgar, eventually shows up in the future in Batman Beyond. So in the future past. So there's that's continuity that's built from it. It's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, mentioned Mandragora, which I think that name is the name of the character that that is responsible for Huntress's parents' death, at least in one of her origins. She's another one of those characters that has had about 15 different origins, I think, over the years. But obviously the look and the is completely different, as you mentioned. Definitely borrowed a little bit from Kingpin, also a little bit from the character Tobias Whale, who's the if folks who are familiar with the live action Black Lightning series, is sort of this albino mob boss who's sort of indestructible. So there's a little bit of Kingpin, there's a little bit of this Tobias Whale character, and then you also obviously you did use the comic name to sort of really make this completely different versions, completely new character. And again, as we'll get to in voice acting and things, and then certainly in visuals, even in a second here, to really just create a perfect antagonist where it still feels like Justice League episode, this, because so much of this is really heavy on, on the topics of, it's crime bosses and backstabbing and murder and revenge and everything. And then to still have this sort of larger than life villain that the heroes can fight against at the end. That's really kind of, running through them to an extent, at least at first. It really creates a fun environment. And that kind of taking a little bit from a few different comic characters and molding it into this one antagonist for this episode is it really just all comes together, along with all the other stuff that we've mentioned, when it, the comedy and the heart and and character growth.
Absolutely. I think the most amazing thing about this episode, and then I'll give my score, that I was thinking about as I was watching this, is you take this series that was originally grounded, it was a Batman the Animated Series, grounded, these no superheroes, nobody with crazy powers, all like fighting with mobsters and stuff like that. And this kind of brings it back from, despite the beginning where we're in a literal international space station hanging out in space with a bunch of superheroes and a Martian, this episode is very much grounded in that original feel. And this story, I couldn't help but feel, especially when you get to that car chase across the train tracks, I was like, man, if this doesn't feel like this could have been a Batman the Animated Series plot. Like, it's just so grounded and so different than what we get for the majority of this series, which I love Justice League Unlimited, but you're dealing with aliens and conspiracies and superpowers and then clones and all of that, like all of these things that come into play here, and Brainiac and all of that, like all of that, it becomes very a lot larger than just heroes on the ground without powers fighting with their fists. And this episode brings it back down to that, which is a nice breath of fresh air for the series. It allows everything else, I feel like, in this storyline to breathe a little bit. And you build up some characters, flesh out some characters that otherwise may have not fit in some of those stories where you have aliens and you're going to outer space. So it does a great job of doing that. I love this episode. Tremendous writing from Miss Simone. Great direction. Everything about this episode, I love it. I had no choice. 10 out of 10 for my plot score.
Nice. Yeah, I was there. I also gave it a 10 out of 10 for all the reasons you mentioned. It's so much fun. And then on top of that, as we often like to talk about, our characters are in a different place than they were at the start of our episode, and we know more about these characters. And not so spoiler alert, some of these characters have pretty big roles to play in that big Cadmus arc episodes we have yet to cover. So when you get to those episodes and those characters are in danger, or they have a sort of a character moment or something there, it means a little bit more because we had this 22 minutes to learn a bit more about them and learn to care about them a little bit more.
Absolutely. Right on with that. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, and that is going to be animation and visuals. I'll let you go first because I feel like I talked a whole lot about that plot. But no, actually, you know what? I'm gonna go first. I will just say from the get-go, it's an interesting. We talked about it. We talked about the opening scene with the two gangsters and the scones, and I thought, like, man, this is kind of a lackluster opening here. Not a lot of action. But then once you finally introduce the Huntress and she literally drops from the skies with the moon as her backdrop, I thought, man, what a great entrance. And there is a lot of action in this episode but it's broken up by a lot of dialogue and a lot of story progression too. But what did you like when it came to animation and visuals?
Well, first, I think we just have to mention, you already touched on it briefly, but yes, Edgar is the younger version of the albino psychic that we meet in Batman Beyond and the Zeta Project, and so it's funny to see that. But yeah, as we already sort of touched on in plot a little bit, the character designs are really something that stuck out to me. Huntress has a redesigned look here from, again, we hadn't really seen her in any sort of direct action. I think she's in Darkheart. Maybe we might see her like swinging a staff at some little spider robots, but. But otherwise she's just kind of been standing in the background of a few scenes, but she's pretty much wearing the Jim Lee hush. I could be wrong about who designed that suit, but I would think of it as I
think it's attributed to Jim Lee. Yeah.
But that suit certainly, which is kind of her early to mid 2000s look, pretty much perfectly adapted into this series with the white stripe across her chest, and then going sort of outlining her cape. Really, really fun. As you mentioned, that opening sequence, which she sort of comes out of the air and takes out the two goons, and then is sort of skulking through the mansion and sort of encroaching on the bedroom and pulls out the gun. It's all very, very dramatic. And but yeah, the other character designs I will mention here. Of course, Mandragora himself, as we've already talked about, he's a little bit Kingpin. He's a little bit Tobias Whale, and it just really comes across as this. Again, you see him, he's in like a kimono when we first see him. and he's eating these oysters, and he's being so slimy, and he's literally like licking the plate while he's talking to Black Canary. Just could not be more sleazy.
Yep.
And they really captured that well. And then at the end, when he's actually fighting the Justice League, you totally believe it though, because he just comes across so imposing. And when he starts to run, you have like these big booming sound effects, and you really feel like there's weight to this character. And he's like, he picks up Black Canary by her head at one point, and he's swinging around this big steel girder and sort of making quick work of the Question and Green Arrow. So him as sort of just this force of nature, I think it comes across really well. And then elsewhere in character designs, I'll just mention we have some unofficial cameos in this episode. The first maybe being, as you mentioned, in that first scene, we have the characters of Cecil and Tony, who are talking about scones, and who are later dressed up as the fake cops that break Mandragora out. Clearly, or based on Cecil is based on Bobby from The Sopranos, while Tony is based on the character of Paulie, who, in fact, the actor who played Paulie, the name in real life is Tony Sirico. So definitely, and actually, when we get to voice actors, there's definitely no doubt in my mind that the other character is based on Bobby, because it's the guy who played Bobby in the show voicing him. Spoiler alert. So. We have some Sopranos unofficial cameos there, and then playing the role, so to speak, of Helena Bertinelli's father appears to be none other than Scarface, but Tony Montana, of course the famous Al Pacino role, a bit more DCAU'd. He's got the big barrel chest and everything, with the black bolt, sort of the bangs hanging down, and the literal scar across his cheek. There's really no mistaking for who that is exactly. A lot of fun little visual homages to mob movies and television shows here thrown in, which I think is just a really neat touch.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree. I think it's plenty of fun to be had there with the homages and nods to classic gangsters. But yeah, I was like, man, I wonder if Helena realized that her dad was Tony Montana. Like that's pretty crazy. Al Pacino himself hanging out there. But yeah, go figure. Yeah, I think as I said, I think there's a lot of story that is told here. So there are action beats. I would say that the first fight between the Huntress, Question, Green Arrow, and Black Canary is likely one of the coolest ones that we get. We get a lot of the shaky cam that happens, and a lot of camera moving as the characters are avoiding punches. And one of the things that I thought was really neat was there's a point where the Question connects a punch with Green Arrow, and there's this with the white flash that they sort of use a lot of times to indicate the impact. The white flash occurs and it immediately shifts. They use that as a transition to a punch or a kick that's, I think, being connected by the Huntress to Black Canary. So there was a lot of back and forth in that scene, and I thought that was directed very, very well. Right before that, actually, there was something that stuck out to me too, as you mentioned, as Mandragora is taunting both Green Arrow and Black Canary. He initially goes after Green Arrow first, trying to say all these suggestive things to Black Canary in an effort to rile up the Green Arrow. And there's this one part where he's talking specifically about these oysters, and they went from this point of view shot behind Green Arrow, and it's just his hand hanging down, and you see his fist clench. And I was like, man, this is a comic book panel. This is exactly what this is. This is exactly, if you were reading a comic book, this is exactly the view that they would give. You could see Mandragora past his hanging arm, and his fist clenches real quick, showing you, like, it was perfect. I was like, man, this is like reading a comic book. But I really like that. And I think, of course, the car chase is really great too. We get some great car action. Those you don't have a ton of those throughout, especially when things are taking place in space and are relying more on the fisticuff side of things. But I thought the action beat of a car chase, bringing some of those, we saw a lot of those actually, I feel like, in Batman the Animated Series, because that was a much more of a grounded thing. So bringing that back and allowing this car chase, as you mentioned, that takes place with this oncoming train, and the Question drives his car down one of the tunnels just in time, and the reactions on the face of the Green Arrow and Black Canary as they see the train coming, and the tension building as to how they're going to get out of it before the train crushes them. I loved that. Canary's scream also, that I thought that was pretty intense also, as she's holding this canary cry. She's spreading her arms out. We get the visualization of it as she's hitting Mandragora with it. He kind of puts his arms up to try and block it, and we see the full force that he's taking as it begins to rip his shirt and jacket off, and he's standing there taking it. And then there's this slight smile that he gets when he realizes he's coming closer, and he's not gonna, he's gonna be able to outlast her. I thought that was great as well. I think also the initial, I think we talked about this in the Doomsday Sanction, but for a character who doesn't have a face, how do you provide emotion to this character? And I thought even in that very first scene where and some of it is definitely the vocal performance that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but I feel like he's very much in that opening scene where the Huntress walks into his dorm. He's very dismissive in his hand motions, and he's clearly just like not paying this girl any attention, which I love because it doesn't give you a single hint that he has any sort of attraction to her until the final scene. And I love when he breaks the news to her when she's like, why would you help me? And he's sort of, the character himself, because he can't emote it in his face, they have him sort of embarrassingly, bashfully like turn away from her a little bit when he admits that it's because he likes her. And I was like, man, what an effective way to communicate his like borderline humiliation of having to admit that he likes this insane person. Just great way to communicate emotion for a character that you otherwise it's hard to do so because they don't have a face.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. Yeah, it's all body language, and obviously we'll talk about voice acting in a little bit here, but but yeah, the sheepish way, as you said, he kind of turns away and is a little bit as he's sort of telling her about it is quite tremendous there. And yeah, there's a lot of fun bit there. Yeah, the Canary versus Huntress fight it's like it kind of goes 0 to 100, and again, we always talk about that. I think I always talk about that when it seems when Joaquim de Santos is the director of these episodes, but they're always just like there's a little extra flourish, I think, in these fight scenes. And there's just a spot where they're sort of fighting, and Huntress is kind of taunting Black Canary, and then Black Canary catches her Huntress's foot on a kick, and then just sort of turns and spins and throws her like head first into a car, and it's just so brutal. And it's just, yeah, I thought the fight sequence between them is fun, and the car chase sequence I think is really fun, as they're sort of jumping this tow truck they use as a ramp, and then sort of dealing with the train. And an example of them again using, I think, CGI vehicles, at least the Question's car and the train are, but using that cell shading to kind of hide it a little bit. So I think it worked out pretty well. And yeah, I think it all kind of comes together there. Again, I kind of talked about it in the plot, but the flashback sequence of Huntress's parents being killed is really, really harrowing. Like from when when her father tells him to get behind her, as you said, it kind of mirrors what happens later in the episode with Mandragora and his son. But you see shadow of this hulking figure, and Mandragora throw his fists up in the air, and apparently coming down, and then it just cuts to this close up of young Helena's eye, which then zooms out a little and fades into adult Huntress's eye. And then later, when Huntress is now threatening Mandragora in front of his child, we sort of get this close up of Edgar's eye, which then sort of transitions back into young Helena's eye and back to Huntress's eye. And it's just this really good example of just like really pushing in, and among all of this crazy superhero action, kind of just using these really dramatic, simple things, these transitions of just really focusing in on the eyes of these characters. I thought was really, really clever, and again, just really adds to the weight of what happened and what Huntress in that moment is considering doing. Is she going to take on and basically become to this child what Mandragora was for her for the last 20 some years or whatever. So it's just really, really dramatic, and then the sort of the camera effects and the close-ups and things they used, I thought really, really added to that sequence as well.
Yeah, I agree. And the fact, like you said, that they went back to it in that final scene, and we see that maybe our character has had some growth, and we do that through the visuals that, as you said, that she compares this to exactly what she went through before. So yeah, I really, really enjoy a lot of this. As I said, there's not as much action maybe as you would think. I love that we do get sort of a round 2 fight between Green Arrow and the Question and Black Canary and Huntress at the docks, but it's really not completely fully wrapped up. We do know that there is a second fight later on in the 3rd season, a rematch between Huntress and Black Canary, but that will have to wait for another episode to get that fully fleshed out. But yes, I think that there's a lot to enjoy here. I didn't think anything particularly blew me away, other than maybe the car scene, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that they also didn't use CGI cars for that. They did go seemingly with the classic hand-drawn vehicles for that, and I think that really added to didn't take me out of the scene as I feared it may if they had gone with the CGI vehicle route as they had other times in the series. So kudos to them for going the old school route there. But very, very strong episode. A lot of things that I enjoyed, from the start of the episode to the end. And because of that, I ended up giving things a very strong 9 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'm just 1 point lower at an 8 out of 10. Yeah, I think it's really strong overall, and I think some of a lot of the best moments for me visually were those non-action beats, like I said, just really trying to make you feel, again, the fear that the children are feeling, and then the anguish and the hatred that Huntress feels, and sort of seeing and sort of the cold look on her face as she's seemingly contemplating going down this very dark path. I think those are maybe some of the best moments, even if it doesn't have as much spectacular action as some of our other episodes do.
Absolutely. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. As you mentioned, 2/3 of the dynamic music partners responsible for this week's music. What stood out for you when it came to some of the music that was featured in this week's episode?
So I don't have a ton for music. One bit I did notice is that when Huntress is first sort of teleported up to the watchtower, and Jean sort of comes bearing down on her, and you sort of get just touches of the original Justice League theme brought in, which I thought was kind of a neat touch. And then I think throughout the episode you kind of get a lot of what I would consider more of what you would expect from a JLU episode, as far as you get a lot of guitar and more drum and guitar heavy music in your action beats, and sort of building up to those moments of dread. I do think there's a moment when sort of I think Mandragora knocks Green Arrow down, and he's sort of charging towards him, and Black Canary cuts him off to sort of have their big one-on-one showdown. There's sort of a theme that comes in that I think I believe was also played in the Cat and Canary episodes, to kind of bring that back to be the Canary's theme here, which I did sort of stand out there, because we always like to note when there's a returning sort of heroic theme that comes back from a previous episode. So definitely think there's some strong musical moments there, and probably the biggest ones come from that final bit on the docks.
Yeah, I had that notated as well, and yeah, there is a lot of heavy guitars. There's I think that the music that accompanies the chase scene in the vehicle, there's some great guitar wailing that starts out with some heavy percussion that I feel like matches them sort of headed down the railroad tracks as the question pulls onto the railroad tracks, the percussion. And as soon as they recognize that somebody's following them, it sort of picks up and you get more of the guitar come in. That same guitar is matched in the initial fight between the four heroes, and really picks up once the first punch is thrown. So we have that as well, and then matches towards the end. Also, I thought that the leading up to the point, and certainly some of the horns and keys, or the pseudo horns and the keys through the synthesizer that are played as we're sort of waiting with bated breath to find out what Huntress is going to do with regards to Mandragora, and the flashes of her flashing back, and then cutting to Edgar and him looking terrified, and then Mandragora sort of pushing Edgar behind him. And so the tension really building as, kind of waiting what's going to happen. And then once she pulls the trigger and aims it, and the steel beams drop on Mandragora, there's sort of a little interlude that plays there. But yeah, I think most of it is nothing stood out terribly. I will say that I felt like there was a bit of a missed opportunity to have the Green Arrow theme play when he reveals himself to be standing behind Mandragora at the docks. I get the Green Arrow theme in there. I was waiting for it, and it never showed up. So I was a little disappointed with that. But I do think that the music, even from the start, as the Huntress is sort of revealed in that opening, in that cold opening, I thought was good. And I think it does, you have to listen for it. So I don't think there's a lot that stands out, but if you are listening to it, I do feel like it adds to the scenes. And I feel like that it does what it's supposed to do in creating drama and creating the action, bringing the action up a level a little bit. So for all those reasons, I ended up giving music a good 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'm just 1 point lower there, 6 out of 10. I definitely think there's some good moments, and especially as you talk about, it talks about the the moments where it's building up to that final moment. Is Huntress going to pull the trigger? And you can have that really sort of shrieking, ominous guitar sounding, and then it sort of just drops out almost completely, and you just sort of have a little bit of an echo there as she sort of makes the decision before the music sort of comes back in a more heroic way after it's clear what she's going to do. I think again, we often talk about how it's not only the music itself, but sort of how it's used and when it's used and when it knows to sort of fade out. And of course, not surprisingly with who we have responsible for our music this week, that they're quite good at picking their spots, as it were. So another really solid job all around.
Absolutely. All right, Wayne, well, that will bring us to our final category for this week, which is going to be our voice acting. Not a huge cast, but we have a couple of returning stalwarts and series regulars, as well as a few new voices and a few recognizable names as well. Let's run down this week's voice cast.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. Mostly guest stars, as mentioned, other than briefly we have Carl Lembley as Jean at the beginning, but otherwise it's pretty much our guest cast is carrying us this week. We do have some familiar names we've talked about before, but as I sort of mentioned earlier, we do have briefly Steve Sharippa as Cecil, the henchman, who in fact played Bobby on The Sopranos and plays again a sort of a look-alike to that character here. And then we have Joe Nipote as Tony, who again was based on another Sopranos character. So fun. Again, they have some that really fun back and forth there. And then
But how come when I make the scones, they don't got that good flavor like yours, Tony?
Do I have to tell you again how you gotta add the orange zest, Cecil? You gonna make me give you the recipe again? Huh? You're killing me here, Cecil. Killing me.
I heard something.
Shut up, Cecil. I'm trying to listen.
Why you gotta be so mean all the time, Tony? I'm always nice to you.
You're killing me, Cecil.
For our villain of the piece, we have Glenn Shaddix, who folks would probably know best from a lot of Tim Burton stuff, most famously maybe Beetlejuice and Nightmare Before Christmas. But him playing this sort of, he's another one of those guys who he has an accent that would be hard to place. Correct. But he's doing this sort of vaguely European sounding, sort of ominous villain performance, but great. You could imagine this guy being a Disney villain pretty easily. Like he really has that sinister edge, and again, it really comes across, I think, in some of those moments with him talking to Canary and Arrow early in the episode and dealing with King Faraday.
My job is to prep you to testify before the grand jury, Mr. Mandragora. You're gonna have to come up with a lot more than some mook who may or may not be around anymore if you want immunity from prosecution.
I am doing my best. You can't blame me for being nervous. I have enemies everywhere, even Justice League enemies. Besides, I am ravaged by hunger. Feed me and I shall squeal on all manner of former associates. Speaking of squealing, Black Canary, I notice you can't take your eyes off of me. One can hardly blame you. Perhaps after Agent Faraday helps absolve me of my alleged crimes, I could put you in a cage and have you sing for me.
Listen, you giant tub of...
Green Arrow, may I remind you that you're here strictly in a security capacity?
Yes, why don't you go and fetch me another 4 platters of oysters like a good little leprechaun? I'm sure your girlfriend and I will have much to discuss while you're gone. I like my oysters sweet, by the way. Sweet and juicy.
Let him talk, Arrow. With all the enemies he's made, he never knows if he's eating his last meal.
But, he kind of gets to flex his, spread his legs, or not spread his legs. Kind of gets to, he gets to stretch his legs. Leave that one in. That one's funny. He gets to stretch his legs. Thank you. A little bit and really kind of show some range throughout this episode.
Yeah, I would agree. I was about to say, yeah, he does have certainly some range there, as he is, as you mentioned, the sleaziness at the beginning, then certainly the reveal at the end. Very overconfident at times, also in his ability, and I think even as he begins to be a protective father, as he tries to comfort Edgar, thinking that this might be the end for him. But then returning sort of to after just being sort of sleazy and sort of thinking that he's the smartest guy in the room and outsmarted them, and is just going to be returned to prison at that point, I think is there's certainly a roller coaster of a performance there, of going, especially in that last scene, of what he has to go through. Of he attacks Canary and is sort of being the prototypical villain. Then he goes to the smug, arrogant, all right, well, you got to take me to prison, to the sort of surprised realization that he's actually going to be facing somebody that may not have a moral code and may just kill him, to being the protective father. So yeah, I think there's quite a range that's shown there, and this character that they created, this version of this character that they created for the show, voiced by this character, I think just makes it one of those things where I can't imagine, and it's probably because I've seen this episode so many times, but I can't imagine another voice behind this character. I felt like it was a great voice casting and a great performance all the way around there for him.
We have Morena Baccarin returning as Black Canary, of course, along paired once again with Kin Shriner as the Green Arrow. And again, they're not the main characters of this episode. They're more sort of played as the straight man and woman of this, as they're sort of just reacting to all this insanity that's going on around them. But again, I think they still have a few fun moments, both like we said, in those sort of quieter moments before Question and Huntress show up at the house. They get to again do some comedy, and they also get to have some sort of sweeter, more romantic stuff. And then towards the end, they get to have the more again, the more action heavy, the one-liners. I will say that I give Miss Baccarin a lot of credit, because there's a point where the Black Canary cuts off Mandragora before he can attack Green Arrow again, and she has to deliver the line, "No one messes with the Justice League," which is pretty cheesy, it's pretty corny, but I think she pulls it off. She plays it the exact right amount of serious to it, where it doesn't come off completely hokey or out of place there.
Didn't anyone ever tell you, Mandragora? No one messes with the Justice League.
But yeah, even though not in a starring role this episode, Miss Baccarin and Kin Shriner's Green Arrow certainly still get some chances to shine.
Oh, there's a bunch of great one-liners that Mr. Shriner has, and you're not supposed to drive when you're angry. I loved that line. I loved when he says that he threatens Mandragora, "Don't make me sick, Black Canary." Or I think that's when he's talking to the Question. "Don't make me sick, Black Canary, on you." I loved that. There's a lot of back and forth, and I think even as you mentioned that, or as I mentioned before, that touching moment where there's this sort of question that's posed about the morality to allowing somebody that is well known to be a killer to walk free, or protection in some way in exchange for information, and whether or not that's honestly something that should happen.
This is ridiculous. I can't believe we're going to all this trouble to protect a killer.
It's how it goes, Dinah. They let a bad guy go free, he rats out dozens of others. It's not perfect.
No, it isn't. Makes you wonder how his victims would feel if they knew.
Hey, you gonna get all serious on me?
You bet. More cops.
So, the more the merrier.
Someone else, too.
there's this, it's just this sort of downbeat of a moment that happens just before this big action scene. But I feel like it was written perfectly, and the performances between Miss Baccarin and Mr. Schreiner are just great, because it's just a soft beat where they get to have this little conversation, and Black Canary's clearly struggling with this idea, and Green Arrow, admits it's not a perfect system and it's not a perfect plan, but ultimately it's for the greater good that they're doing it. So it's just this little like half beat of the story, but I thought that little moment was touching, along with the other comedy bits. After Green Arrow gets Jean to teleport them out of the tunnel, and they're in the harbor there, and Black Canary's first reaction isn't to say, "Hey, thanks for saving our bacon." No, she's mad that her bike is destroyed, and she like throws a punch at him, and it's really great. I really, really enjoyed that. That's they have some great chemistry in this episode, and certainly building off of their previous chemistry in their prior episodes. I thought that this was a great showing, especially for them being more supporting cast, as you said, as opposed to sort of the main focus.
Absolutely. And then our other pairing for this week, we have the returning Jeffrey Combs as the Question. Again, we talked about him quite a bit in Fearful Symmetry, the Supergirl episode where he kind of got his introduction, but you have him paired along with Amy Acker, who folks would know from things like Angel and Cabin in the Woods, playing Huntress. And again, that really comes across in all of the body language that we see on screen, as well as the story beats for the two couples. But they could not be any more polar opposite than that sort of like sweet, romantic, quirky, snarky, quippy relationship that Canary and Green Arrow have, whereas they're just these two raving lunatics, just feeding into each other's worst impulses for most of this episode, and they're just playing off each other great. But Jeffrey Combs and Amy Acker together, just again, natural pairing, especially for even though, again, Jeffrey Combs had done one other episode as the Question to this point. Pairing those two off and having them gel as well as they did was just another great piece of casting and voice directing by Andre Arellano.
Do you have any idea what you've done?
Yes, I hunted a murderer the League's protecting.
We don't have time for this. We've got to ask the Question what he just picked up and put in his pocket.
Me?
Don't make me ask again.
Oh. You mean this?
It's a storage key for a place down by the train station.
All right, you two stay here. Don't make me sick Black Canary on you. You've only seen her nice side so far. What was that for?
All that crazy mystery man mojo, and you couldn't even pick up a clue without being seen?
The key wasn't the clue. The key was mine. Now, this list of container ship arrivals I palmed while they were yelling at you, that's the clue.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, their chemistry is almost immediate. As I said, that first scene where the Huntress walks into his dorm and he has to deliver the line, "Okay, bored now, goodbye." Like, and then as she's like sort of continuing to hang around and like poke and prod and try and get him to help her, he's like, "Go away, don't touch that." Like he's clearly just annoyed with her presence, and Mr. Combs, again, having to deliver a performance with a character that doesn't have the benefit of having a face to show emotion. It's all based on his very dry, very sarcastic at times delivery, and she plays off it well. I think they're the perfect DCAU odd couple. For whatever reason, it works very well. That touching moment where he actually recounts to her origin story essentially is a great opportunity for him to do some dramatic work in the way that he tells the story, and then her response, realizing that he's kind of put all this together into why she's out for revenge. and then the aforementioned little bit at the end where he has to finally admit to her that he has feelings for her, and does so. We already mentioned like the animation of the question being sort of ashamed of the fact that he has to admit this, but it's also in the vocal performance because there's this hesitancy that Mr. Combs does before he delivers the line. It is because I like you. it's so good. It's like it was the perfect.
It's almost Shatner-esque, like the pause, or like someone doing a parody of Shatner, at least. Just that breathy, dramatic pause between the words "I" and "like you," or "I" and "like you." Like it's just this really dramatic. It's probably only a second, but it feels so long, so much longer, and it's really quite perfect.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of great performances this week. Everybody that, as we said, not a huge cast, but I feel like the people that had to carry the lion's share of it did just such an incredible job and really rounded out the episode for me. So I felt like I had no choice but to give voice acting a perfect 10 out of 10.
Awesome. Yeah. And I, for all the reasons we've talked about, I also came to that exact same score, another 10 out of 10.
All right. Awesome. Well, Liam, I guess we will. Whoop. That is the sound of the bonus point sound. And you know what that means? Mm-hmm. That means we've arrived at the time where we talk about our bonus points, and that being me. I just want to reiterate just what a perfect piece of writing from Miss Simone for this episode. Like she that story that she shared with how this story came to be, and just the fact that she had not written anything for the DCAU. Obviously a prolific writer before, has done lots of amazing comic book runs, lots of stuff with Batgirl, goes on to actually write another Black Canary Huntress story for Batman the Brave and the Bold later on, another fun one. So she knows these characters well, but man, bat 1,000, you step up to the plate in your first at bat and you hit a home run. Like, how often does that happen? What names can you list off that you can say that happened with? She's in rarefied air with that. So just the fact that she wrote such a great story, a fun story, a grounded story, and is really a tremendous writer that maybe doesn't get enough credit for what she's done for the comic book industry and her writing. Just had to give it an extra +1 for her writing for this episode.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, you can't say enough good things about this. You mentioned this did originally sort of start out as a Birds of Prey idea, and of course Gail maybe most famously is wrote an incredibly celebrated run with those characters as so yeah, it's fun to see her get to take those characters, some of those same characters, on in a different world, a different style, but still as we've talked about for the last hour or so here, just really bring her unique sensibilities and how well it just immediately fits in, and like we talked about, it makes you care about all of these characters more the next time you see them, which is really all you can ask for.
Absolutely. All right, Liam, well, that will bring us to our total for this week's episode. Totaling everything up, I end up with it's a top pick, baby. Go figure. One of my favorite episodes of all time ends up being one of the top picks because it holds up to our critique here. Ends up being a 37 out of 40, including my bonus point. What about you?
Yeah, I'm a couple points lower, not too low though. 34 out of 40 for myself. So good to see it get into top picks territory though, because it certainly deserves it. This is a blast, and as we always talk about rewatchability as we wrap up here, for all the reasons we've already talked about. It's a great fun episode. It's got action and comedy and romance and heart, and then on one side, so it's a great episode in its own right, but then as you mentioned, it also, again, it's great character building, for all of these characters, but especially for the Question and Huntress, who come back as a huge part of the final sort of big story arc of the season. So I think this is an easy 2 thumbs up for rewatchability.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite episodes of all time, if I haven't mentioned that at least 5 times already. So yeah, I'm going to give two thumbs up, even if it wasn't, though. Yeah, for those very important reasons. Character development, a great story overall. There, even though it doesn't, as we said, it sort of sidesteps the Cadmus story arc. It does set up the Huntress and Question love angle that comes back into play later on. We get more furthering the stories of Black Canary and Green Arrow also. So yeah, no brainer. 2 thumbs up. Definitely recommend this one on a rewatch. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. What a fun week we've had here. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this podcast, or if you enjoy our podcast, you can support us a couple of different ways. If you listen to us on a podcast app, and it allows you, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, allows you to give us a rating. We will love a 5-star rating for you. It allows you to leave a little blurb and let people know what it is that you enjoy about us. You can do that. That's one way to support us. Another way to support us is to head on over to youtube.com/thepodtower. You can subscribe to the Pod Tower, and then you can find our videos, like the videos that we post. That helps out a lot. Also, that gets people headed to that channel, and also gets our stuff out there to a different audience on the YouTube there. So that's greatly appreciated as well. If you want to support us monetarily, a couple different ways you could do that. There's a link at the bottom of the podcast. You can also head over to DCAUreview.com and click on our shop, pick up a piece of merch if you'd like to. There's some great stuff over there if you want to support us that way. And of course, you can always follow us on social media at DCAU Review on Twitter and Instagram. Lots of fun stuff happening over there. Lots of great conversation happening on Twitter. Twitter, generally speaking, is a cesspool of garbage, but I will say when it comes to DCAU Twitter, boy, it's a lot of fun, and we have a lot of fun interacting with people for what it's worth. So come on over, join the conversation, and don't forget, if you are listening on Spotify, there is a weekly poll that we put up and a question of the week that allows you to interact with us. So feel free to respond to the question or vote in our poll if you're listening on Spotify. Liam, coming up next week, we have another exciting review of another Justice League Unlimited episode. Let's talk about that.
That is right, Cal. Another episode of JLU up on the docket next week. And we're going to hit pause for a little bit on the Cadmus arc and instead look to one of the last non-Cadmus adventures of this second season of Justice League Unlimited. But it is episode that is steeped deeply in the continuity of the DCAU, because it is a sort of semi-sequel to one of the most epic DCAU adventures ever, which was, of course, the 3-part Star-Crossed. We are going to be reviewing Hunter's Moon, which we'll see Hawkgirl come face to face with some of her former allies in that Thanagarian army. Her, along with some of the other Justice Leaguers, will come face to face with them again. So excited to see how well this sequel could it possibly live up to the original. We'll find out next week.
A Herculean task, to say the least, but we'll find out. Excited to do that with you. And until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Lee.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.